What's up? Being gay is the new coolest thing. So that's why I've come to the gayest part of America, Alabama. I'm just dancing. Also, jetzt bin ich hier. What's your name? What? What's your name? Shard Williams. Great. Try. Shard. 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 Shard Williams. Shard. So, Shadi, what position do you play? I play running back.
T.
T.
And then Gingrich.
Hvor others for that?
G.
For
I. N.
M.
N.
For
G.
like nothing. G.
R.
R.
I.
I.
C.
C.
H.
How does I say that? Gingrich.
Gingrich.
Gingrich. All right, wicked. Gingrich. Gingrich. And as I said the first name?
Newt.
Wagwan, Evertonary. I is here with my main man. His name be Newt Gingrich. And him was the leader of the House of Representatives. Is that right?
Yes.
What policies was you famous for introducing?
Well, probably the most famous was welfare reform. We had a system that paid people to do nothing.
So how long do you think people should get welfare?
We set a pretty firm system that says that you can be on the system for about 4 years.
But ain't people just getting into it after 4 years?
Well, I mean, most people we think should actually go to work.
Do you think that people should get more welfare the longer they is on welfare?
No. We don't think that you earn seniority on welfare.
But surely the longer you is on welfare, it shows that you has got commitment. I mean, you wouldn't like it if you was in a job and didn't get a pay rise.
But our goal is to get you off of welfare not to make it more desirable for you to stay on welfare.
Do you think dads should be forced to pay for their kids?
Yes. If you create the child, you ought to have an obligation to help pay for the child.
What, even after it's born?
Yeah, that's the whole point.
But if you was already paid for the meat, you know, the popcorn, the chocolates, the movie or whatever, the last thing you want to be thinking about when you is getting jiggy is how much is this going to cost me? Makes the whole thing unromantic, isn't it?
Well, and if you're the kind of bum who's going to walk off and leave your kids, the girl shouldn't be with you in the first place.
So does the Republican Party think that homies should take their girlfriends up the butty?
No, I'm not. Look, some guy who says to me, all I want is fun for one night, and then she has to spend the next 20 years raising the child.
For real?
That strikes me as a pretty unfair bargain.
Do you think a woman will ever be president?
Absolutely.
Ain't there a problem that if there is a woman president, they're going to spend all their time on facials, shopping, and getting new shoes?
I think if you said that to most women who could be president, you'd be surprised how tough they are.
But ain't you worried that the old cabinet would be like Brad Pitt on Defense and George Clooney on Elf, you know, because him from ER, you know, and you've just got like all these other good-looking geezers and King Dong in the background.
We've already been through it before. I mean, as I said, Margaret Thatcher was probably one of the three.
Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
What have you done?
Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
I'm a cemetery operations coordinator, or you can just call me a cemetery manager. Part of my job is sitting down with guests and family members of the deceased to set up funerals, facilitate the sales of plots, etc. A 30-something-year-old man named Antonio, very spiritual man, once sat down with me to purchase a plot for his sick father who was in hospice care. Antonio was a Hispanic man with a very thick accent, and I saw in his eyes he was a very caring man. He showed me pictures of his father, who also looked like a very sweet man, much too young to be taken away from his family. But unfortunately, the man's time came that same week, and Antonio arranged for his father's funeral service at the cemetery. It was a very stormy day, the day of the funeral, which is thought to be a sign of good luck. The funeral procession stopped in front of the front office building briefly. I stepped outside under the front awning of the building and saw Antonio in the car behind the hearse. We waved at each other. Due to the weather, I went back inside until the procession was ready to proceed to the burial site. I got in one of the cemetery pickup trucks and followed the procession to the final stop, where I would stand with my umbrella supervising, as part of my job is making sure funeral services go smoothly. After the funeral, I did some laps around the place in the truck just to survey the area, as I did at least a couple times a day. I had a lot of paperwork to take care of, and on top of this, I had to close the cemetery that night. So a little later, I went back to my desk and took care of this. The cemetery closes at 5:30, so as soon as it started to get dark, I drove around the place one more time to ensure all visitors had left, then drove over to the front gate to shut it. It was a relatively warm early March. The days were still on the shorter side, so by closing time on a normal day, it would already be getting darker. But on this stormy-ass day, it already felt like it was nighttime. I was driving back to my office when I thought I saw someone hurriedly walking down one of the lanes of tombstones before turning behind a hedge and disappearing out of sight. I beeped my horn so as to let them know that the place was closed, but strangely enough, I didn't see them again. I grabbed my umbrella and ran out into the rain in that direction. I turned beyond the hedge he turned at and looked down this long row of tombstones on one side and hedges on the other. I didn't see anyone. I looked around in the rain for a solid 20 minutes, but eventually I had to give up. I drove back up to the office and browsed through the CCTV footage. None of it picked up on any unusual movement, even though it was a bit harder to see much because of the storm, and it was also pitch black outside now. I tried to multitask, keeping an eye on the camera while finishing up some of my paperwork, when I heard the front door to the visitation room slam shut. I sprang up from my chair and yelled, "Hello?" My first thought was that it was the same person I saw before. Maybe they got locked in the cemetery and were looking for assistance in leaving. I stepped out into the lobby, but no one was there. I looked around and again said, "Hello?" Maybe the door slamming shut was them leaving. I started looking out all the windows, and I stopped when at one of them, I saw someone on the other side looking back at me with a blank expression. I jumped back and screamed, and they didn't flinch. I stepped closer and made a squinty-eyed, confused look when I realized I recognized this Hispanic, older-looking man. In my head, it reminded me exactly of the pictures of Antonio's father he showed me. With my heart in my throat, I ran out the front door of the building and to the side where I saw the man, but he was gone. He wasn't booking it into the fields, he wasn't hiding in a bush nearby, he was gone. I looked around me as I stood in the rain getting soaked, then ran back inside, packed up my things.
Wait a minute. He said that so there was a Hispanic man, and the guy, whatever he was buried, whatever the funeral for his father, was Hispanic man, and his Hispanic father. So the man this guy saw was it that Hispanic father? Was it the father who was supposedly dead? Was presumed or is presumably dead? Yo, what the heck? That's creepy. That's creepy, dude. The guy was supposed to be dead. Like, maybe it is. Maybe it was him. I don't know. That's creepy as hell. Maybe.
Locked up and got in my car. I opened and closed the gate.
Maybe that Hispanic guy wasn't actually dead. Maybe he wasn't actually dead. Maybe it was just some. Maybe they just. They lied and saying he was dead. I don't know.
Once more locking it behind me, and drove home. When my wife asked me at home why I was being so quiet, I just told her, long day at work. To this day, I think I was just overworking myself and my mind was playing tricks on me, but it still is genuinely disturbing to think about. My name is Jeremy. This was in the dead of October, chilly and windy. I live in a somewhat big town. It's very poor and old, early 18th century type buildings. A friend and I were bored one night and decided to go fuck around at 3 a.m. I know that going
saying that all the buildings were 1800? There's probably some spirits or something like that, dude. Some spirits with that, dude. Old spirits or something like that to like with that and stuff. That's kind of unsettling. That's unsettling. That's definitely unsettling, man. I would not be
Going out at 3 a.m. in a poor town isn't exactly smart, but we like to have our fun. We got bored of driving around blasting our music. We're both very big metalheads, and at that point we had our own band, so we decided it would be interesting and cool to walk around a cemetery in the town. Behind the old town square, there's a massive cemetery. It's divided by two sides of a highway, both sides taking up about 20 acres of land. As I said, it's massive. We decided to check out the older part of the cemetery. This part is completely separated from the rest of the newer cemetery with an old iron fence and gate. We get to walking around and checking out the cemetery, trying to read the old moss-covered graves, taking pictures, being a little bit disrespectful, I know. But these were graves from at least a century ago, so there was no one living that would be upset by it, and I'm sure the people in the graves didn't mind too much. After about an hour of checking it out, we sit down next to a giant pecan tree in the middle of the old cemetery. That's when we hear this little girl laughing. It was really close to us. At first, I assumed maybe it was a toy left on a child's grave or something like that. I'm not one to scare easily, so I just figured it's motion activated or something like that. We are not at all easy to scare, so we both sort of laugh, pointing out that it's creepy and just keep talking and enjoying the ambiance. Then, as in all stories like this, I get the feeling of something or someone watching me. Once again, I just figured that I was letting the entire thing get into my head. Then my friend says he thinks he sees someone in the shadows of a small wooded area right next to the cemetery, of which we were really close. At this point, we're both a little creeped out and decide to get up and leave. And that noise, the exact same noise, played again, and we hear leaves crunching underneath the feet of someone. That's when we booked it. We ran down the hill leading to the old part of the cemetery, down where my car was parked. I've never ran that fast in my life. It sounded like that laughing noise was following us at that point. We both sort of just went into full fight or flight mode at that point, going as fast as we could without thinking. The noises behind us stopped as we got to my car. I started my car and put it in drive, pulling out into the highway without looking. Luckily, no one hit us. We get down the road to the only gas station that's open at this time of night to check in the back of my car. We had both been discussing how we were scared some shit had been done to it. We get around to check and immediately find the back door is open. I know for a fact neither of us ever opened it. There was no reason for us to open it. I look in the back seats, make sure nothing's there, get right back in the car and peel out. I'm still confused about what happened that night. I'm not sure if we both overreacted or what. All I know is that I still feel that weird feeling that something is behind you whenever I tell this story.
Why is everybody putting up with ads like it's 2010? Like it's 20.
Idea ever, and I even told him that. Still, we had no school the next day, and I knew exactly which cemetery he was talking about. I don't know if one should even call it a regular cemetery. It's just a small plot of land with maybe 100 tombstones at most. The tombstone's very archaic looking, and any time we'd pass, there would be no signs of anyone having come to visit within the last decade. The site probably dated back centuries, and it had this super creepy vibe to it because it was closed off by a gothic metal fence, and it was surrounded by woods on two sides, the road on one, and some old abandoned building on the other. Everything about it just gave scary vibes. It took a little persuading, but Sean managed to get me to want to check it out too. Ironically, it was a very cloudy, wettish kind of day, I guess conveniently adding to the mood. Sean pulled up his Honda to the side of the road. I told him to pull up more so it wasn't obvious. This was a low traffic road, so it would look kind of suspicious. He pulled up a few hundred feet down the road, and we got out and cut through the woods so that any potential passing traffic wouldn't see us entering the little cemetery. Hopping the fence in the woods was easy. It was maybe a 3 or 4 foot fence. Sean kind of took the lead on this since it was mainly his venture. He led us through the eerie little plot of land, and we looked at the archaic tombstones. They all seemed to be from the 19th century. The writing on some of them was illegible at that point. I know it sounds super dumb and cliche, but I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched constantly. I started looking around the surrounding woods. I told Sean how creepy this was. I know, he replied. Still, with the feeling of being watched, I looked at the abandoned building next to the cemetery, at one of the windows. For a brief moment, I knew I saw someone standing at the window, even through the fog, smudge, and dirt on the glass, but they casually either ducked or walked away from the window. I told Sean we were being watched by someone in that building, and he turned to look at it as well. Then he went to look for the entrance to it. I told him don't. I said we should just leave before we get in trouble. I stayed still by the tombstone he was looking at while he walked around the building, and then he found a way in. He called me over, but I stayed put. Then I heard some loud kind of crack. So I looked in that direction, and there was this older man, probably around 55. Gray hair, had on a black raincoat. I believe he was wearing jeans, and he had a mustache. But that's all I really got of him. Then he opened his mouth and screamed, not just yelled, he screamed, "Get out." He screamed it so loud I thought I saw birds fly away from being startled. And just like that, I started to feel lightheaded, and suddenly everything went dark. The next thing I remember was waking up to being dragged in the woods. I freaked out, thinking I was being kidnapped. But when I turned and got up, I saw it was just Sean. Sean was freaking out about something. He told me to follow him and run back to the car, so I didn't ask questions. As we ran through the woods, I heard something close behind me, and when I turned, I realized we were being followed by someone, so I ran even faster. We got to his Honda, and he basically put it in drive before the car even had a chance to fully start. When Sean was inside that abandoned building, he found a sigil of Baphomet painted on the wood floor, which is basically the sign of Satan. Around it were a bunch of freaky dolls with buttons for eyes. He didn't get to see anything else in the building, because he heard the old man scream at me outside. He came running to find me passed out on the floor, and he saw the old man slowly walking over to me. He started to drag me away from the old man and into the woods. He actually literally picked me up and threw me over the fence to get me. It was
Oh, so his friend, he passed out probably because he was so scared of the old man. And um, he basically, his friend would have got him out of there before the old man could probably do something to him. You know what I mean? You don't imagine what the old man would have done to him, right? What would the old man have done to him, dude? He probably would have freaking done some, or hurt him or something like that. I don't know what that the old man would have done, dude, but 'cause that's pretty good friend then to help get him out of there, you know, get him so he doesn't get like whatever the old man was gonna do something. So he threw him over the fence. What the heck? Man? He picked up his friend and threw him over the fence. What the heck? I mean, it's a good friend, I guess. You know, it's a pretty good friend of him to be looking out for her. Still, I mean, why the heck are you even going in a cemetery anyway? Though, you're asking for something to get effed up, man. You're asking for something to get effed up if you're going into a cemetery.